for your own protection, for the protection of the mu'mineen around the world, for the shuhada, ulama, sulaha, anyone who served Islam. Fatiha. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل نعم المولى ونعم النصير أستغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه وأعوذ به من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد والثناء لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه ثم الصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما سيدي ومولاي بقية الله في الأراضين روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Dear brothers and sisters, respected Sayyid, A'adamallahu ujurana wa ujurakum. Condolences to all of you on these nights when the family of the Holy Prophet was taken captive from Karbala. Before I start, as I mentioned yesterday as well, and first and foremost for Qibla and for the rest of the brothers and sisters, I know it's a long day. A lot of you might have come for Maghrib and then one majlis and two majlis. So please, there's absolutely no pressure. There's no offense. I would not mind at all. If you feel more comfortable leaving, if you have to leave and you're tired, I'm completely okay with that. And especially for Malana, who I know has not been feeling well. So inshallah, please feel completely comfortable. So alhamdulillah, it's a blessing that we're blessed with Maulana's presence. Usually for a person who of his level and his knowledge, who are level of my teachers and above that, it's usually a double-edged sword. So from one aspect, it makes me really nervous sitting in front of Maulana. But from the other aspect, the good side of it is, if I make any mistakes, then inshallah he's there to correct me. So zimmedari aapke upar pad jati hai Maulana, inshallah. For his protection, for his health, for his continuous increase in his tawfiqat, please recite a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad ajil farajah. So yesterday we had our first session, and the topic that we chose was Karbala and self-reflection, the matrix of perfection. And we talked about how two of the very important aspects in our lives to be able to reach that perfection, that is the purpose that we were created. So the entire purpose that you and I were created and sent to this world is to be able to reach that perfection, is to be able to reach that proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is to be able to reach a point where we would start becoming, and inshallah become, manifestations of Allah's attributes. And we have that potential, and we discussed this yesterday. Then we talked about how the event of Karbala, everything that happened in Karbala from when Abi Abdullah alayhi salatu wasalam left Medina till the day of Ashura, and even after that, there's so many lessons in there. And as Maulana also mentioned, this is not just a normal person. This is the Khalifatullah. This is the Hujjatullah. This is the one that Allah has sent. His knowledge is associated with Isma, protected by Allah. His actions are also ma'soom. This is a ma'soom who's sent for you and I to be able to take as a guide. Yes, the Quran only mentions وَلَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. But we can extrapolate that because based on the words of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, that not just the Prophet, but even Amir al-Mu'mineen, even Imam al-Hassan, even Imam al-Hussein, and all the Imams alayhimus salam are those perfect role models for you and I. So if we look at Karbala and we limit our benefiting from Karbala to just a narration of history, then that's a disservice. It's a disservice to ourselves, it's a disservice to Karbala, and it's a disservice to the sacrifices that Abi Abdullah alayhi salatu wasalam gave in the way of Allah, in the way of doing islah of the ummah with regards to the deen that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent. So this is something we talked about. Now if someone wants to, first of all understands this, and then wants to pursue this path, what I want to talk about today is one of the most underlying and foundational concepts in the Quran and in our ahadith, that if we can understand that, most of the issues would follow and would be consequences of this. So that's inshallah what I would like to talk about, and which is the concept of ubudiyya. The concept of ubudiyya. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhal nas, antumul fuqara'u ila Allah, wallahu huwal ghaniyul hamid. That remember, O people. It's not talking, there's some places where it says, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu. It's talking to people who've brought iman. Some places it might use other titles. But over here, it's all encompassing, all of mankind. All of mankind. So this is a message for everyone. This is a message for every human that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. That's how foundational this concept is. And he's saying, Antumul fuqara, understand that you are fuqara ila Allah, with regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, relative to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu huwal ghaniyul hamid. Allah is the only one who's ghani. Allah is the only one who doesn't need anything. Now when we look at the word fuqara, right, sometimes it's less seen in Islamabad maybe, but at least in places like Karachi, you see every signal that you stop at, there's some people, they're faqirs, they're asking you for money. So maybe the first thing that comes to my mind is, yes, me with regards to Allah is like how this person is with regards to me. They're sticking their hand out so they can get some money. I stick my hand out, oh Allah, give me some rizq. Give me a job, give me some money, give me a better salary. But when you look at what the mufassirin are talking about, they're saying, no, it's way beyond that. It's way beyond that. When the Quran says, Antumul fuqara'u ila Allah, it's more than just rizq. It's more than just money. In your entire existence, you're dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You have nothing, not even a fraction of what you have is your own. Not even a fraction of what you have is your own. And some scholars give the example of, like if there's a sun, and there's rays of suns that are rays of the sun that are falling onto something. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bila tashbih, if, just to understand as an analogy, if He is the sun, then we are just the small ray that falls onto, for example, the carpet. That if even a hand comes in the way, that ray ceases to exist. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if He even thinks about taking His attention away from you and I, we would cease to exist. Not that we won't have a job, not that we won't have money, not that we won't have these blessings, we would cease to exist. That's how dependent I am on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's how dependent I am on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu huwal ghaniyul hamid. It is only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even the Holy Prophet and his family, the high status that they have, in these regards, they are also very similar. That if it wasn't for Allah, then these entities would not exist. Would not exist. This is what the Quran is trying to tell you and I. And if we understand this, then a lot of our issues would get resolved. Let me give you another example. Right? Some of us have people who come and help us at the house, right? Either help us out with cleaning or help us out with dishes or cooking or driving or whatever it is. If you were to tell this help that comes to your house that, can you please do this laundry? And they were like, why? You'd be taken aback. But you'd be like, I'm a mu'min and I'm a good person. Let me, please do it because I need to go somewhere tomorrow and I need to wear these clothes. You're like, okay. And you're like, yeah, I did a really good job. The next day they ask you again, can you please wash the dishes? Why? You'll be like, oh. But you'll try to maybe control yourself. What if they asked you this every single time you said something to them? You would say that, listen, I give you money not to ask me questions, to help me out whatever needs to be done. And this is not even not even close to being a true relationship of a master and what a slave is. This is a very majazi, it's a relationship that society has created due to unfortunate circumstances that exist in society. But when we talk about between Allah and I, that's the true relationship of a master and slave. Where do I come off asking Allah, why did you have to put a salat in the middle of the night? What is the reason for the 2 rakats? I'm at work during Zohar time. Did he not know that? Why the longest salat during Zohar time? It's so inconvenient. Why is it that the inheritance of women is half and the men is more? Why is it that women have to wear hijab, men don't? Why is it that men have to earn and women don't? Why is it? Why is it? Why is it? First point, does the slave have the authority to ask the master? The master says, hey, if I tell you to do something, just be quiet and do it. Be quiet and do it. But there's a misconception here sometimes. Because we talk about Islam being a rational religion, which it is, and there's a hadith that say that whatever the Sharia says, the aql says. Whatever the aql says, the Sharia says. But the misunderstanding over here is we think, without first of all having studied Islam, without having studied the Quran, without having spent any time, even after all this, we understand that if I understand something, then it can be part of the Sharia. Otherwise, it can't be part of the Sharia. Whereas what Islam is saying, listen, there's something that we've innately wired you in a way that you'll understand. That's your fitrah. Fitratullahi allati fatara an-nas alayha. The Quran tells you clearly, there's some things that you've been hardwired. That is how you work. But listen, on top of that, we've given you the intellect, which gives you the ability to be able to sift through what's right and what's wrong. But listen, that's still not enough. And that is why we're going to send prophets to you, because there's some things that you independently cannot understand. No matter how much of a genius you are, there's some things that you cannot independently understand. We think that if I cannot reach that conclusion, then it can't be part of Islam. And a lot of times we reach our own conclusions and start acting according to those conclusions as if that's Islam. And on top of that, we start propagating those as well. We start propagating those as well. Whereas what Islam, when it says that Islam is a rational religion, what it means is that if Allah and the Prophet and the Quran were to explain something to you, and you had all the prerequisites, then you have enough capacity to be able to understand that. But independently, there's a lot of things that you cannot understand. So that's one aspect. On top of that, does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala come out and give us reasoning for everything? For some things He does. For some things He does. For some He does explains straight in the Quran, explicitly in the Quran. Other things, no, through the Prophet or the Imams. Like for example, when it talks about fasting during the holy month of Ramadan, the end of the verse says, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. So we understand that, listen, there's some kind of connection between fasting and taqwa. There's some kind of connection between fasting and sacrificing and getting closer to Allah. So there's some hints given over there. But other places, if Allah hasn't given the reason, can I always understand what the reason is? I can guess. What is the wisdom behind this? That Allah, if you created me with the intellect, why didn't you tell me all the reasons for everything? And perhaps, again, I'll say perhaps, alaykum salam. Perhaps the main reason behind that is that Allah says, listen, part of you is the intellect, but part of you, don't forget, antumul fuqara'u ila Allah. I want to nurture that within you. That when the master tells you something, regardless of if you understand it or not, you bow down. You bow down. And if you bow down enough, and if you submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enough, there will be a point when you will reach that no matter how many sacrifices you've given in the path of Allah, you will still stay رِضًا بِقَضَائِكَ وَتَسْلِيمًا لِأَمْرِكَ. This is what you and I are created for. To submit to the Master, submit to the Ghani, submit to the Hamid. Realize that we are fuqara ila Allah. Don't think we should not be dealing with Allah like how we deal with each other. Right? I get one more degree than the person in front of me, I think I'm like God compared to him. How dare that person say anything in front of me? I studied in the Hawza for 10 years, 15 years. How dare a person say anything in front of me? Wait, just if you studied in the Hawza, that should have humbled you, not made you into God. Right? And that applies everywhere for all of us at every level. Sometimes when we're not the top person in the company, we hated how the boss deals with us, how the CEO deals with us. But then when we act with the people who are helping at house, when we act with the people who are lower than us, then unfortunately it's the same things that are repeated. These are signs that a person has not reached the level of ubudiyah. These are signs that a person still has a God sitting within themselves. Although Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had set a system, and the Holy Prophet also said, how can it be that a person who is washed 10 times a day, 5 times a day, that there could be any dirt or any filth remaining on them? And that is why Allah sent the salat. And that is why Allah perhaps said that repeat at least 10 times, Iyaka na'budu. It is only you who I worship, Allah. You are the ma'bud. La ma'buda siwak. You are the only ma'bud. But I don't think about the Quran I read. I don't think about the salat I recite. I'm just so busy with just being able to catch up with the actions, that the biggest blessing that Allah gave me, which is my intellect, I'm not using that. The Quran is pouring its heart out. أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. On top of that, Allah's designed a system that is repeated 10 times. He makes me repeat it 10 times. Maliki yawmiddin. But I don't care. I walk around as if I am the Maliki yawmiddin. As if there's no answers I need to give. As if there's not a master who's going to be sitting there looking at every action that I do. These are signs of a person who's still in somewhat of a state of ghafla. These are signs of a person who hasn't reached the level of ubudiyah. Before I go forward though, let me just kind of say this over here, that a lot of these concepts, when we talk about ubudiyya, when we talk about iman, when we talk about taqwa, when we talk about religiosity or whatever you want, these are notions that are on a spectrum. On a spectrum. It's not the case that, God forbid, right, if we don't see the highest level of iman, or the highest level of ubudiyya, or the highest level of submission, then we say, oh, this person, no, sorry, you're not part of us. No, it's on a spectrum. And part of the journey that we have, the reason that you and I have been sent to this world, the reason that you and I have been given a life, the reason that you and I are still alive today, unlike the people who died yesterday and the day before and the day before, is so you and I can pursue that path, is so you can I realize that there's a spectrum, is so you can I enter that spectrum first of all, and then elevate ourselves so we climb that ladder that will take us to the further ends of the spectrum. I don't know if I'm able to explain this, but the entire purpose that you and I are breathing right now, the entire purpose that you and I can see with our eyes, the entire purpose that you and I can speak with our mouths, the entire purpose that you and I can hear with our ears, and you can go on and on and on. وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you were to try to, a verse of the Quran, if you were to try to count the blessings of Allah, لَا تُحْصُوهَا, you can't count them. You won't be able to count them. And every single one of those blessings has been given to us so we can pursue this path. So we can pursue this path. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. What does it mean to reach a level of ubudiyya? It means that Allah becomes a central figure in my life. My life starts revolving around Allah, not the other way around. Right? So this is what Deen is inviting me towards. This is what the Quran is inviting me towards. This is what Abi Abdullah alayhi salatu wasalam, Ruhi lahul fida, is inviting me towards in Karbala. Do you think he enjoyed giving Akbar in the way of Islam? Do you think he enjoyed taking his 6-month-old baby and being slaughtered by a spear? This is not something a father enjoys. But when it comes to comparing it to the deen of Allah, for Allah, then no sacrifice is too big for Abi Abdullah. No sacrifice is too big for Abi Abdullah. So a lover, a mu'min, a follower of Abi Abdullah, fine, maybe we can't reach that top end of the spectrum. But shouldn't we at least realize what he's done? Should we not at least think about what he's done? Should we not at least enter the spectrum of sacrificing for the sake of Allah, for the sake of His deen? Explicit verse of the Quran, and I recited it yesterday. قُلْ إِنْ كَانَ آبَاؤُكُمْ وَأَبْنَاؤُكُمْ وَإِخْوَانُكُمْ وَعَشِيرَتُكُمْ وَأَمْوَالٌ اقْتَرَفْتُمُوهَا وَتِجَارَةٌ تَخْشَوْنَ كَسَادَهَا وَمَسَاكِنُ تَرْضَوْنَهَا أَحَبَّ إِلَيْكُمْ مِنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَجِهَادٍ فِي سَبِيلِهِ فَتَرَبَّصُوا حَتَّى يَأْتِيَ اللَّهُ بِأَمْرِهِ. Explicit verse of the Quran, that if any of these things, your fathers, your children, your brothers, your family, your money that you've collected, these businesses that you've set up and you're so scared of losing, these houses that you're so comfortable in, if any of these things are more dear to you than Allah or His Prophet or jihad in His way, فَتَرَبَّصُوا, then just wait and see when Allah sends His command. This is not extremism. This is the message of the Quran. This is the message of the Quran. The Quran is trying to teach you and I. Come to the level of ubudiyah, and then everything will start falling into place. Don't think you're the God. Don't think you're the master. I am the master. I am the master. You are the slave. Even to the extent, when someone goes and gains education, gains knowledge, even Islamic knowledge, and if they haven't understood ubudiyah, if they haven't understood any of these things, if they haven't understood that they need to humble themselves for this knowledge, then as Imam Khomeini rahmatullah alayhi says, that this knowledge itself becomes the hijab akbar, the biggest veil between you and Allah. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? That you're studying the words of the Quran, you're studying hadith, that's all you're studying all day long for 15 years of your life. You went with the intention that it becomes, this lights up the path between me and Allah, between me and perfection. But what went wrong along the way? That this itself became the biggest hijab, started becoming the biggest veil between me and the perfection, me and my path. Now look at that, and now look at me, someone who leads a regular life, who doesn't deal with the Quran on a daily basis, who doesn't deal with the hadith on the daily basis, who doesn't deal with the haram on the daily basis, who doesn't deal with these. My salat, my roza, my affairs with my family, my job, my business, is this aligned with the purpose that I was created for? And I'm sure it is for a lot of people. I'm sure it is. But the point is this, if it's not, then we need to realize that this is what we need to do. And if it already is, then don't set a ceiling for yourselves. The spectrum is infinite. There's still room for improvement until we're able to reach that point where we can at least our lives reflect the lives of the A'imma alayhimus salam, because this is what they were sent for. This is what they were sent for. So this is what Allah is saying. This is what the Quran is saying. In Surah Hajj, which is Surah number 22, verse number 11. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى حَرْفٍ. And of those people, يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ, they worship Allah. This is not talking about people who don't worship Allah. يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ, but عَلَى حَرْفٍ. And I'll explain that later. And the verse continue. فَإِنْ أَصَابَهُ خَيْرٌ اطْمَأَنَّ بِهِ. If good comes to them, then they're very happy with it. وَإِنْ أَصَابَتْهُ فِتْنَةٌ انقلب على وجهه. But if a test comes towards them, if a difficulty comes towards them, they turn their back. Why do they turn their backs? They used to do ibadah. Yes, they were doing ibadah, but they were مِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى حَرْفٍ. عَلَى حَرْفٍ means that on the side, not as a central figure. Allah wasn't a central figure in their life. They used to live life, and then they would sprinkle a little bit of Islam on there as well, just so they feel a little better. Just so they feel a little better. Just so it's something that they can live with. But the people who don't have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a central figure in their life, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى حَرْفٍ. If good comes to me with regards to religion, they're okay with it. They have itminan, they're happy. If a difficulty comes, انقلب على وجهه, they turn back. And what does the Quran say about these people? خسر الدنيا والآخرة. We're talking about people who the Quran is saying worship Allah. خسر الدنيا والآخرة. ذلك هو الخسران المبين. And this is the clearest khusr or khusran or loss that you can imagine. Because you wanted to be quote unquote religious. You wanted to show your religiosity. So you restricted yourselves in some ways. And therefore you lost the world. You weren't able to do what the people without deen were doing. But you didn't accept Allah completely. You didn't enter the realm of ubudiyyah. That's why you lost the akhirah as well. خسر الدنيا والآخرة ذلك هو الخسران المبين. See how important these verses are? And this is why, and I keep repeating this, but I will keep repeating it. This is why Karbala is important to you and I. This is why we should be commemorating Ashura. This is why we should be commemorating Karbala. Not just for the sake of some cultural activity that we have. Not just for the sake of just narrating history. And as I've mentioned before, that those things have their own barakah in and of themselves. But you and I, we were designed for something further than that. Something beyond that. Something beyond that. So this is what the Quran is saying. Now where's society pulling me towards? Where's society pulling me towards? When I'm a kid, what does my parent talk about? Did you study well? Did you study hard? When I get a little older, make sure your O levels are all A's. Make sure you do really well. Make sure your A levels are well. So what? So you can go to a good university. Okay, I got into a good university. Now make sure you study really well so you get a good job. Okay, I got a good job. No, but the salary is not enough. Make sure you get a better job. Study, work really hard at work. No matter how many hours you have to stay, so you can get a better job. And then what? So you can buy a house. And then what? Then you can invest in a house. And then what? Then you can get a car and a bigger house and go from this neighborhood to that neighborhood and that neighborhood to this neighborhood and next neighborhood to that neighborhood. A person of your status cannot be living in this place in a house so small. You have to go to the next neighborhood and the bigger house. And this is what I'm busy with my entire life. When I'm a kid, I think I'm too young to follow the path of Allah. When I get a little older, I'm busy with studying. When I get a little older, I'm busy with job. When I get a little older, I need to get married and then things will get settled. When I get married, then okay, when I have kids, then things will settle. Guess what? Welcome to life. Life doesn't slow down for anyone. Life will keep throwing curveballs at you. This is the world. The world will not give you and I a break. Shaitan will not give you and I a break. We need to learn to live in this world. Ad-dunya mazra'atul akhirah. Whatever it is that you're going to get in the akhirah, whether it's good blessings, whether it's the highest levels of blessings, whether it's the highest levels of Jannah, or God forbid, it's the worst levels of hell. Whatever anyone accomplishes, it is through this world and through this world only. This is the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we've been given just a limited time over here. A limited time. Fortunately, I would say, but perhaps some would say unfortunately, that we don't know how long that time is. It could be today. It could be today. Do I actually believe that it could be today? Do I live my life as if it could be today? Do I understand that I'm just a mere slave and the master decides if it is today? Do I understand when the Quran says, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un, that it could be today? See, there's so much that a person who follows Abi Abdullah alayhi salatu wasalam, who wants to be a lover of his, who wants to be the lover of the Ahlul Bayt, we talk about to other people, right? No, did you not hear about the Hadith al-Thaqalain? How can you leave the Ahlul Bayt? Well, what about me? Yes, I've kind of stuck to the Ahlul Bayt. Am I, first of all, truly following the Ahlul Bayt? Because if I were, then I wouldn't have neglected the Quran. So how am I better than anyone else if I've even held on to the Ahlul Bayt but ignored the Quran? I'm 30 years old, I'm 40 years old, I'm 50 years old, I'm 60 years old. I still don't, these verses, when I hear them, it's as if it's the first time I'm hearing these verses. And if I've heard them, I've never thought about them. I've never contemplated them. I've never dissected them. I've never thought how these apply to me. And I'll just give you one example of that verse, like the verse, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. When do we use that? When do we use it? When someone dies. Have you ever seen anyone use it at any other time? No. No. What does the Quran say? The Quran says, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. It says, we will definitely test you. The Arabic of the word, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ. There's like several ta'keeds over there. If you want to translate that, definitely will test you. Oh Allah, what will you test me with? بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ. Sometimes it will be fear. And you can think about all the types of fear. Sometimes it will be ju'. Sometimes it will be hunger. Sometimes it will be نَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ. Sometimes your money will get less. Sometimes you'll lose all your money. Sometimes you'll make a loss. Sometimes it'll be نَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَنفُسِ. Sometimes people close to you will lose lives. Sometimes, if it's the epitome of it, you yourself will lose life. Sometimes the thamarat, the blessings that we've given you, that you take for granted, you lose those. The Quran is saying, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ. That listen, every single one of you sitting in Masjid Khadijatul Kubra, Salamullah alayha, that I am giving you the message. I am your God. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ. Don't any of you walk out of this without understanding that Allah is saying, I will definitely test you. Why do I walk around thinking that the Quran doesn't apply to me? Perhaps I haven't read the verse. And then the verse ends with وَبَشِّرَ الصَّابِرِينَ. And okay, Allah, if I'm tested, what am I supposed to do? وَبَشِّرَ الصَّابِرِينَ. Give the good news and the glad tidings, those who try to be at least patient when I test them with the difficulties. Allah, who are these? الَّذِينَ إِذَا the verse after this, Surah Baqarah 156, I believe. The last one was 155. الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Look at what the Quran is saying, that the meaning of إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون is. It's saying, it's trying to tell you and I, you will definitely be tested with big tests, with small tests, with tests from the right, with tests from the left, all types of tests, and you will be tested. Your duty and my duty with these tests is what? وَبَشِّرَ الصَّابِرِينَ. Who are the sabirin? That whenever they're tested with a test, whenever they face a difficulty, they remember Allah, that I am a slave of Allah. Inna lillahi. Sometimes it's translated as we come from Allah. I personally prefer the translation, we belong to Allah. It doesn't say inna lillahi. We belong to Allah. I'm a slave of His. I'm a slave of His. It's kind of like, right? Again, the analogy is a little off. It's not exact, but it's like if you tell the help at home, okay, do this. And then the next thing you tell them, do this. They're like, nope, done for today. Can't do anything. I did the dishes in the afternoon. The nighttime, you do the dishes yourself. People are like, wait, I'm the master, you're the slave. This is what Allah says, that when you're faced with a difficulty, realize that the blessings that you had, the nafs that you had, the amwal that you had, the thamarat that you had, the food that you had, the peace and security that you had, was a blessing from me. I can take it away whenever I want. And I don't take it away because I want to be the strict teacher who likes to see everyone fail. No, it's for your own good. So you can build yourself. So you can elevate your soul. So you can reach perfection. Inna lillah. And then the next part, so I belong to Allah. I've reached the level of ubudiyah if I think about these. Wa inna ilayhi raji'un. I'm not here to stay in this world. 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. If you're really, really good, 100 years. That's it. Blink of an eye. Blink of an eye. And if you don't believe this, everyone has fathers or grandfathers or people that they know that are much older than them. Go ask them, how did your 60 years of life go by? Blink of an eye. This is just an example that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to this verse, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, with a verse before that, with a verse after that, so you and I can read the Quran and understand. But I've limited it to just when someone dies. And even that, now it's a lot to actually go and say this to someone, right? It's usually just through WhatsApp, through Twitter, through Facebook. And therefore, you can't write the whole thing, obviously. It takes too much, right? Inna lillah, ... This is me dealing with the Quran. Whereas the Quran is saying, وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ يَا رَبِّي إِنَّ قَوْمِ اتَّخَذُوا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ مَهْجُورًا. Verse of the Quran that the Holy Prophet will say, Oh Allah, oh my Rabb, this qawm of mine neglected the Quran. Neglected the Quran. I gave Hussein in the way of Allah so he can save the Quran, so he can save the message of the Quran. But the lovers of Hussein even don't care. The lovers of Hussein even don't give importance. Again, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I know each and every one of you is a mu'min, is a lover of the Ahlul Bayt, is a lover of Imam Hussein. All I'm trying to say is there's an entire spectrum. And the reason you and I were created to be able to climb that spectrum. Climb that spectrum. And there's examples in history that show us that it's possible. And the best of those examples is in Karbala. Is in Karbala. Imam al-Hussein is there to help you and I. The Ahlul Bayt are there to help you and I. All we need to do is realize that, recognize that, and just stick our hand out. Stick our hand out. Ayatollah Araki, rahmatullah alayh, one of the great marjas. So the person I'm telling you this story from who talked about this story, he says that I asked Ayatollah Araki myself. He said 13 years I had a relationship where I'd keep going to his house. Ustad Ali. I just didn't mention him, maybe most people don't know it. Ustad Ali says this, that 13 years I used to go to Ayatollah Araki's house and I heard it from his own ears. He said there was a year when usually in Iran, they'll have a system, and sometimes in Pakistan as well, where for going for Hajj, you need to put a little token in, and then if your token comes, then you can go. So he says there was this one year that my daughter got her chance to go for Hajj, and it was her wajib Hajj. And her husband could not go with her because he had already done his wajib Hajj and he didn't get a token. He says, this is a daughter of mine that I've always raised with special attention. She was very close to me. She was a lady who was very chaste. She was bahaya. She had iffat. She's extraordinary. So she came to me after she found out that she has to go for wajib hajj, and she says, Baba, I've never even traveled within the country by myself. How am I going to go to a different country? I'm scared, I'm worried about this. And Ayatollah Iraqi tells her, listen, the people who go for Hajj are guests, are mehman of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah knows really well how to do mehman nawazi. He really knows how to take care of his guests. Don't worry and go, inshallah, you'll be fine. But if there's a time that you reach that you feel like you're in trouble, remember to recite this. Ya Hafidhu, Ya Alim. Ya Hafidhu, Ya Alim. Hafidh because he will protect you, and Alim because he knows best what your situation is. So she goes. And several months later, she comes back and she goes to Qom to visit her father. And she says, I went to Hajj. And he says, so how was it? She says that when I went to Masjid al-Haram for the first time, that I wanted to do tawaf, I looked down upon the place where to do tawaf, and it was packed. It was packed. There was men there. There were some men whose ihrams were off. Like, it was just sliding off. And I was thinking, how am I ever going to go and do tawaf over here? There'll be men who'll be touching, and it's not on purpose sometimes. It's just, and whoever's gone for Hajj has seen this. So she says, I was really worried. So I sat in the corner of Masjid al-Haram, and I started crying. Until a point I remembered, my father had told me, Ya Hafidhu, Ya Alim. And I started reciting that. She says, after a little while, I hear a voice. I didn't see anyone, but I hear a voice. And the voice tells me, come and do Hajj with Imam Zaman. Come, O noble lady, and do Hajj with your mom. She's like, they took me towards where the tawaf starts, near Hajar Aswad. And she's like, I saw this like round kind of area. It wasn't that big, but I entered into there and I held on to the ihram of the Imam. And we started doing tawaf. She's like, my entire 7 tawafs, I kept telling my Mawla how much I love you and how much I want to give everything for you. She's like, before I knew it, all 7 rounds were done. Not a single person had touched me. Not a single person had touched me. And she says that when the tawaf was done, he just disappeared into the crowd. Ayatollah Iraqi, when he was telling the other person this, he said there was one time when I was blessed with the opportunity to go for Hajj. And I was excited because I was going to go with my friends. And I was like, if we go in a group, then, we'll be able to do it better. They can protect me because I'm old and they'll be able to help me. He said we tried so many times that they would try to chain up their arms so I can just go close to Hajar Aswad and touch it. He said every time we would get close, we would get pushed away. She said, look at my daughter. I'm the Ayatollah. My daughter depended on Allah and Allah only. And me, I was busy. I was thinking that my friends will help me. See how sensitive God is? Ayatollah Iraqi with the level he has. Just because he's depending on his friends, or even the thought comes in, and then there's his daughter, this chaste, this bahaya, this afif lady who's worried about this. but she goes all the way. The Imam is there not just for her. He's waiting for you and I. He's waiting for you and I to call out to him. I say Al-Ajal, Al-Ajal. How many times do I talk to my Imam? When's the last time I talked to my Imam? When's the last time I cried to my Imam? When's the last time I talked to God? When's the last time I cried to God? God and His representative, the Imam, is there waiting for you and I. It's just a matter of you and I to stick our hands out. And this is what the 72 did in Karbala. And they found Abi Abdullah right there to hold their hands and take them and purify them through the difficulties and through the tests until they reached the epitome and they reached Shahada. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Sallallahu alayka ya Sayyidi wa ya Sallallahu alayk ya Madloom. Abi Abdullah and his sacrifices and his tests in Karbala, one can't even start to imagine the tests that he gave. One thing is giving yourself in the way of Allah. But those who have children understand the pain of not just giving a child in the way of Allah, not just letting a child go, but even the smallest difficulty that a child faces. Go ask a parent how difficult it is if you're not a parent. Go ask a parent how difficult it is. And Abi Abdullah alayhi salatu wassalam, Ruhi lahul fida, look at the tests he's giving in Karbala. He brings the Shabih Payambar Akbar to Karbala. He brings the 6-month-old Asghar to Karbala. He brings the 4-year-old Sakina to Karbala. What 4-year-old deserves to be slapped? What 4-year-old deserves that her earrings are pulled from her ears? Look at the tests that Abi Abdullah alayhi salatu wasalam has given for the sake of the deen, for the sake of the deen. Look at the ma'rifah of Ali Akbar. Look at the ma'rifah of Ali Akbar. History says that when they were traveling towards Karbala, there's a point that they reached where Abi Abdullah alayhi salam fell asleep. He wakes up and he recites, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ali Akbar comes to him, Baba, is everything okay? And he says, oh Ali Akbar, I saw this dream and there was a munadi, there was a caller in there that said that yes, this caravan is moving, but death is following this caravan right behind it. And Akbar says what? Ya abata awalasna ala al-haq? Oh father, are we not on the path of haqq? Abi Abdullah says, Nahnu wallah, I swear to God, we are on the path of haqq. And this is where Ali Akbar's ma'rifah shows. He says, what difference does it make if we're on the path of haqq? If we go fall onto death, or death comes and falls upon us. This is ubudiyah. This is ubudiyah. This is what you and I want to be able to reach, insha'Allah. انشاءاللہ. راوی کہتا ہے کہ جب اصحاب سارے جا چکے تھے تو بنی ہاشم کے جوانوں میں ایک شور شروع ہوا. فجعل یودع بعضهم بعضا، ایک دوسرے سے خدا حافظی شروع کی. تقریباً سب مقاتل میں لکھا ہے کہ بنی ہاشم میں سے سب سے پہلے جانے والے علی اکبر تھے. آج تک مجھے سمجھ نہیں آیا کہ جب علی اکبر بابا کے پاس آئے اجازت لینے کے لیے تو بابا نے بالکل بغیر جھجک کے کہا بسم اللہ، جاؤ میرے بیٹے، کربلا ہو چکی تیار، تقدم ولدی، جاؤ میرے بیٹے. لیکن مقتل لکھتا ہے کہ جیسے ہی علی اکبر روانہ ہوئے ایک مایوسی کی نظر، مولا نظر الیہ نظر آئس من، ایک مایوسی کی نظر سے دیکھا. کچھ علماء کہتے ہیں کہ تھوڑی دیر بعد انہوں نے واپس بلایا اکبر کو. اکبر آئے خدمت میں مولا کی، مولا آپ نے ابھی تو الوداع کیا تھا، پھر کیوں بلا لیا؟ کہتے ہیں کہ کچھ بولے نہیں حسین، بس دیکھتے رہے علی اکبر کی شکل کو اور زاروں تار روتے رہے. جب اکبر جانے لگے تو کہا اے میرے لال، جب تک ہو سکے اپنے بوڑھے بابا کو پلٹ پلٹ کے دیکھتے رہنا. اکبر گئے، علی کا پوتا، حسین کا بیٹا، شجاعانہ جنگ کی. ایک وقت آیا کہ اکبر پھر واپس آئے. یا ابتا العطش قد قتلنی، اے میرے بابا پیاس میری جان لے رہی ہے، کیا ایک گھونٹ پانی کا مل سکتا ہے؟ پر کتنے امتحان ہیں مولا حسین کے، کتنے امتحان ہیں. کہا میرے لال پانی تو نہیں ہے، اپنی زبان کو میری دہان میں ڈال دو، شاید کچھ اطمینان مل جائے. اکبر نے جو زبان دہان میں دی ایک دم واپس، اے بابا آپ کا منہ تو میرے منہ سے زیادہ خشک ہے. کہا میرے لال جاؤ، بہت جلد میرے نانا تمہیں سیراب کریں گے. علی اکبر گئے، شجاعانہ جنگ کی، امتحان دیکھے میرے مولا حسین کا. ایک دفعہ نہیں، 2 دفعہ نہیں، 3 دفعہ روانہ کیا شبیہ پیغمبر کو. اپنے لال کو 3 دفعہ روانہ کیا. علی اکبر نے شجاعانہ جنگ کی. ایک وقت ایسا آیا کہ علی اکبر سے اب سنبھالا نہیں گیا. ایک تیر ناک گردن میں پیوستہ ہے، ایک کمر میں پیوستہ ہے. علی اکبر نے اپنے ہاتھوں کو گھوڑے کی گردن میں ڈال دیا. گھوڑا کبھی اس طرف، تلواروں کے وار، گھوڑا کبھی اس طرف، تلواروں کے وار. جب زمین پہ گرتے کہتے ہیں بابا حسین جو جلدی سے اکبر کی لاش پہ پہنچے، آنکھوں کو یقین نہیں آ رہا، شبیہ پیغمبر فقطعوہ بسیوفہم اربن اربا، ظالموں نے شبیہ پیغمبر کے ٹکڑے ٹکڑے کر دیے. کیا یہ امتحان مشکل نہیں تھا میرے مولا کے لیے کہ ایک وقت ایسا آیا کہ مولا جو ہے خیمے گاہ پہ آئے اور کہنے لگے اے میری بہن میرے ششماہے کو لا دو، میں خدا حافظی کرنا چاہتا ہوں. زینب اصغر کو لے کر آئیں، کہنے لگی اے بھیا جا ہی رہے ہو تو پانی لیتے آؤ ذرا اصغر کے لیے. دشمنوں نے کوئی رحم نہیں کیا. کتنے امتحان ہیں میرے مولا کے. ایک وقت ایسا آیا کہ شش ماہے کو جب لے کے روانہ ہوتے تھے میدان کی طرف، مقتل لکھتا ہے کہ اپنی ابا کے دامن کو اصغر کے منہ پہ ڈھانپ دیا. جس باپ سے یہ برداشت نہیں ہوتا کہ سورج کی تپش میرے بچے کو جلائے، تھوڑی ہی دیر ہوئی تھی، آگے جا کے پانی مانگا. ادھر کچھ مقاصد نقل کرتے ہیں کہ ابھی عبداللہ چاہتے تھے کہ اصغر کے سوکھے ہوئے لبوں کا بوسہ لے لے، لیکن اس سے پہلے کہ وہ پہنچ سکتے حرملا کا تیر فَذُبِحَ مِنَ الْأُذْنِ إِلَى الْأُذْنِ. مقتل کا جملہ ہے کہ ششماہ جو ہے اس طرف سے اس طرف تک ذبح ہو گیا. کتنے امتحان ہیں میرے مولا کے. صبح سے لے کے حسین لاشیں لے کر آ رہے ہیں، میدان سے لاتے ہیں خیمے تک، لیکن اس دفعہ جو یہ ششماہی کی ننھی سی لاش لے کے چلتے ہیں، اتنی بھاری ہے یہ لاش کہ کبھی جاتے ہیں کبھی پلٹتے ہیں. انا للہ و انا الیہ راجعون. شاید سوچتے ہوں گے کہ رباب کو کیا جواب دوں گا، چاند سا بچہ. مقتل کہتا ہے کہ خیمے گاہ کی پشت پہ گئے، اپنی تلوار سے ایک ننھی سی قبر کھودی، لیکن ظالموں نے ننھے اصغر کو زیادہ دیر قبر میں رہنے نہیں دیا. اگلا دن تھا 11 محرم کی تاریخ کہ دشمنان جو ہے اشقیاء نیزوں کو لے کے پورے میدان کربلا میں گھومتے پھر رہے تھے. ایک جگہ ایسی آئے کہ نیزہ اٹک گیا، نکالا تو الا لعنت اللہ علی قوم الظالمین وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون.